Thank you all so much. And I want to make sure to remind everyone that you can submit questions. I have the iPad up here. So if you have questions throughout our discussion, please submit them. And I'm going to reserve some time at the end and I'll keep an eye on it. So would love to hear your questions if you have them. But we're going to go ahead and jump into our conversation today. I know that, we've heard a lot about some of these topics that we're going to dive into, but the focus of our panel discussion today is all on real world opportunities. And so we're going to be hearing from each of our panelists about how they're actually using, well, you know what? I'm not going to take the time away from them. We're just going to dive right in. So first of all, we're going to talk about digital technologies and how they've already made a substantial impact on patient care. And so I'm just going to ask each of our panelists today to share a real world success story, a specific success story that exemplifies this impact. And Hannes, I'm just going to start on the end with you.
Yeah, thanks, and thanks for having me here today. So I think for anybody who works with an innovative project, the biggest satisfaction is to see that to go to the market, see people actually using that. And I think at Takeda, we have a lot of those things already going to the market, being used. There's a pipeline of things. There's some of things that I can actually share publicly. We've had a really great project going on in Sweden in inflammatory bowel disease, which is a chronic disease, where we work with a hospital and AI company and the local university with a Karolinska Hospital, really to figure out the flare prediction with an AI algorithm with the local patient registry. And that's really something we've launched. It's been publicized. It's really amazing when you see, when we talk so much about personalized treatment, and we are actually delivering personalized treatment for those people, because people have very different responses to inflammatory bowel disease. They really struggle to get the optimized treatment. And also the healthcare professionals, they struggle a lot because they have a lot of routine and standard meetings that can be cut off. How do they actually tailor which is the right medicine for you? And we as a pharma industry are, of course, our pharma company are interested, which is the right, treatment for these patients? How does our drug work? What is the real world evidence we can generate for that? It's been I think one of the big benefits for us having launched this was really the learning experience, that how much partnership it takes. And there's a lot of talk about partnership before, how much partnership it takes to get it on the market. Now we launched. Now we also realized that, we need the second one. We need to figure out how we improve it.
Thank you so much, Hannes. And Sarah, would you like to add on to that? In just terms of digital technologies, and do you have any real world success stories that you can share from your organization?
Yeah, thank you. I think similarly, Sanofi has been using real world data and artificial intelligence for a number of years, not just in the last 6 months when Gen AI kind of made it the hot topic again, but we've really, especially in the rare disease space, we've been looking at the diagnosis journey for our patients, and then what we're learning from the claims, where different symptoms are showing up. And for rare disease patients, these are of course, they're scattered throughout the country. The data are not as an aggregate. Historically, we have the registries, but the claims data are showing us different diagnosis journeys than we've previously seen in academia. And what we've been able to do with that is flag lesser known symptoms for rare disease patients and help bring that into the diagnosis journey and flagging patients that we think need to be tested for their rare diseases. And there's been an increase in success both at the top of the funnel for increasing testing, and then finding the right disease and challenge that they've been facing, and then finding treatment.
Thank you so much. And Dorothy, I know you bring a different perspective to the conversation, but I would love to hear in your role at GoodRx, and if you could talk a little bit about some real world examples and any success stories to share there.
Sure, absolutely. Thanks so much. And thanks to the whole audience for being here today. So most of you as consumers may know GoodRx. We're over a decade old in helping patients afford their medication. Probably you know the GoodRx coupons. But a little less than 3 years ago, we started partnering with manufacturers, both from a specialty drug perspective and then also retail drugs, to help manufacturers surface their savings programs, copay cards, et cetera, all the way to patient services. Think, hub services, PA services, and other things if you're a specialty medication. Because we realized of the 100 million consumers that come to GoodRx and depend on us for affordability, it was mainly they're using GoodRx for generic medications. So from a real life experience perspective, we've had a number of brands, again, both retail and specialty, who have put and surfaced their services and copay cards in our environment to great success. Ultimately, the success is they're helping the patient at that kind of last mile or the finish line to filling their prescription and obviously driving outcomes. As you may know, GoodRx is brand drug pages, right? So the 80% of the people that come to that page are looking to either fill or refill their medication. And we've just had a tremendous amount of success helping manufacturers surface, again, as I said, the great programs that you're trying to offer patients to convert at that last mile.
All three wonderful examples of real world examples of improving patient care and how each of your companies are doing that. And I know the other two discussions that occurred today, there was a lot of talk about data and the data in healthcare and how much there is and what to do with it. And so we had planned to talk a little bit about the strategies for navigating those challenges and what do you do with all this data and sort of, overcoming this obstacle and also an opportunity at the same time. But Dorothy, do you want to start with that question and just talk a little bit about, what are some of the challenges with the increasing amount of data and how GoodRx is navigating that?
Sure. I'll comment on GoodRx and then also a few other things that I've had, the pleasure of working on from a data perspective in my career. For the purposes of GoodRx, from the day we were founded, it really is all about transparency and the privacy of folks' data. I think it's something that we all deal with. The good news is with the rapid, I'll call it sophistication in data de-identification processes, as well as the ability for companies to combine massive amounts of different data sets. Obviously, we live in a claims world, right? Where we have the pharmacy claims data, but there is no doubt that we always look to work with other information to help better personalize this experience for our users, our consumers. We also use the data from the over 900,000 HCPs that come to our site, looking for information again on how to help their patients afford their medication and looking at their journeys, what they use, what they look for, to help again personalize the experience for those folks as well. In former lives, when I worked for companies, we were involved in real world evidence data, more EMR and chart data. There's some really interesting things that can be done on a longitudinal basis to kind of help look at signals of side effects, helping companies with REMS programs, helping companies with a lot of other things that used to have to be done kind of, well, I know it's real world, but like on pen and paper with actual doctors, just being able to look longitudinally at the data is something I'm very excited about. But I think, Sarah, you guys have some experience with that.
Yeah, and I think you hit on a good point there. And Hannes, if you have anything to add, but I think there's a lot of data, but the actionability and the pull through about what to do with that data is still somewhat nascent compared to what the opportunities are, and especially representing at least Sanofi. I assume Takeda has similar challenges. There's rules, there's regulations around what you can and can't do with that data. And you're right, the improvements on anonymizing and de-identification is certainly helping. But even then, what do you do? If you find a anonymized, de-identified patient that we believe has a rare disease that needs to be treated, how do you make that into something that patient can actually know about? And it's not necessarily our job to do that at the pharma company, but if we have the power and we have the insights, how do we create the pull through as well? I don't know if you want to add anything from you guys.
Yeah, it's difficult to add much to this. I think also when it comes to data, the devil is often in the details. It's not the same. It's like if we work on digital biomarkers and rare diseases, it's a completely different set of questions. I think one of the concerns with data we do have is also I would say equity. So does data really, with more data, does it actually represent better? Is more representative, or is it just more data about the same cohort of people? As a global company, where we're trying to serve patients all over the world, this comes always up, especially when we develop digital biomarkers. So if we do something here, is this going to work in South Africa? Is this going to work with the patient population somewhere else? And when we talk with our AI and ML specialists, they always give us a dressing down, did you really go through this? Do you understand this? And I think that's really also important for us as a pharma, because we put the patient first. So we really need to be able to validate. It's not enough. Hey, great, it works here with this data. We need to start thinking, all right, down the road, how it's actually going to work. And these questions need to be posed for data early on. So.
And Sarah, you kind of touched on something that I wanted to dig into a little bit more, and it was how digital capabilities and some of the technologies that you all are talking about, excuse me, are reshaping the patient journey. So what does that look like? How is the journey being reshaped, and how are they gaining deeper insights into things such as access and affordability and adherence? And I'll start with you on that question, but I would love to hear from others as well.
Yeah, absolutely. I'll start with a controversial comment, which is it's making the patient journey a little more complicated. I'm sure myself and everyone in this room is engaged with the health system in the last 18 months, and the number of surveys, the number of apps, the number of different interfaces I've had to interact with basic care. Just because we can digitize something doesn't mean we should. And I don't need 16 more apps for, a simple orthopedist appointment. But on the bright side, to be a little less controversial, there's a lot of improvements happening. I like that you mentioned digital biomarkers. I think that's a huge area of opportunity. We had the Bellerfon and Actigraph study earlier this year that got a lot of attention, where the company was able to use a digital biomarker as a primary endpoint for their study. Unfortunately, the drug didn't have feasibility to move forward, but they were able to do a faster study with fewer patients and bring insights to that patient community more quickly. And I think that's really important, even if the drug didn't succeed.
Absolutely. And I love that you talked about challenges and opportunities, because I think that's important to touch on both. And Dorothy, is there anything that you wanted to add on there? I know I'd love to hear your perspective on that and how it's reshaping the patient journey, either challenges or opportunities that you're seeing as well.
So I tend to be a bit of an optimist, so I'm going to talk about the opportunities. But there's no doubt, and I had a conversation this morning at breakfast with someone I've known for a lot of years. So what I'm optimistic about is the use of data to improve and understand various patient journeys is something that excites me. Patient journeys used to be pretty linear. Now we're at a state where we understand that it isn't just one type of patient. There may be 5 types of patients. The work that is going into building patient personas and really, really digging in. So I know one of the things I'm excited about it is GoodRx with some of our pharmaceutical partners we work with. We're one piece of the partnership, right? We may have data and insights about a certain drug and the path that somebody takes to fill or refill their medication, and that, their type of behavior, but partnering us with other folks that a brand team might work with early on in building those personas. I'm optimistic because the more sophisticated in understanding a true patient's journey. And again, there should be more than one, and it has a lot of branches, and it's a lot more, sophisticated. I'm very optimistic that different pieces of data, different partners working together with a given pharma brand is really making, I think, a difference for patients' experiences, and then ultimately driving better outcomes as well. I know we did a recent thing with a company in the cardiovascular space who actually was partnering with us and others prior to launch, the drug's not approved yet, to try and learn more about a cardiovascular hyperlipidemic state and the various patient journeys that people today that have high cholesterol are taking. So we used a lot of data from the perspective of understanding, the use of statins and other things to kind of help inform a patient persona. Again, not just us, GoodRx, but combined with other partners to really help. And I think that collaboration is something I'm optimistic about, and I don't think happened 5 or 10 years ago. So hopefully, ultimately, the patient experience and again, outcomes will be better.
And that's wonderful to hear, especially from someone with decades of experience in the industries like you, Dorothy, to hear that there's this type of collaboration that's presenting new opportunities that wasn't there, like you said, 5, 10 years ago. And Hannes, what about you? What would you add to that?
Yeah, maybe to share really how we go about it. I think first of all, I think we need to dream about that we want to change and transform the patient journey. Sometimes we just drag down because everything is difficult and so, but I think really, so what is great when we work with the scientists, we need to, have the license to dream. We're going to innovate. We're going to change things. It's really important. It's a bit different between the inline products and maybe I say something about our pipeline. So they're mostly, first in class or best in class assets. So when they come to market, they are set to change how the care and treatment are provided. How do So the healthcare providers are not ready to integrate that in. So it's a big question. How do we actually go about it? Can we help the doctors? Can we help the hospitals and healthcare systems to provide access to the treatment and then administer that treatment? If it's a really rare disease, it's sometimes a big question is disease awareness. You don't want to raise expectations about, a treatment that is available before it's really available. So when we go about this, we really study closely the whole patient journey, and what the digital health team does is trying to spot, which ones are really the pain points we need to address with digital health solutions. We cannot and we should not go through always, for the whole patient journey. I think, but we need to really think of where can we really have the biggest outcome that really supports the patients, and really how can we create value for those patients, for the healthcare providers, and of course we want to demonstrate that value later on. I think the whole real world evidence comes after that. We want to demonstrate that value for the payers and others down the road, and that takes really we need to look through the patient journey, and for every indication it's different. It's not always the same. I'd just like to mention, for one indication, always we think about the early diagnosis and those things. For one indication, the patient journey team came back and said, well, we think we should really focus on care coordination. And we were like dumbfounded. Yeah, what did this? All right, this makes sense. So we really need to listen the patients, the caretakers, and then our own experts who really study the patient journey throughout.
And I can actually add an example to that too. At Sanofi a couple of years ago, we had a patient population where we believed they were suffering from, we knew they were suffering from depression in higher rates than the average population, and we wanted to come in with a solution for them. And prior to launching down the path of a depression solution, we actually did 75 patient interviews from around the world, and came out with very different insights that depression was a burden, but their chronic pain was actually something that was insurmountable for them. And if we proposed a solution, they said that if you don't help us with the pain, the depression won't go away anyways. So those insights changed our trajectory and hopefully helped our patients down the road.
And Sarah, I'm going to stick with you for this question as well. Kind of diving into getting a real world sort of data project off the ground is a complicated, complex endeavor. And I'd love to hear your perspective on what are the challenges that you've identified in doing this, and then also your strategies for navigating those challenges as well.
Great question. There's a couple comments for that. So one of the first is that there's a balance between really understanding the unmet need within the company, within the team, within the disease area, within the value chain, and really looking to solve an unmet need rather than having a solution searching for a problem. That's one big one. We have a demographic of people internally excited about innovation and what we can do, that sometimes get too excited and really try to find a problem that doesn't exist. And then the other side of it is there's continued innovation and changes happening in the market, and we need to beg teams to make those changes. I think practically one of the things that we've tried to do is sort of do a mutual financial approach. So have core innovation or digital teams de-risk trying something new, but then ask for skin in the game from brand teams or other teams there to really make sure that they're invested in the outcome of it as well.
And thanks for sharing that. And Hannes, anything you would add to that in terms of challenges you've identified or strategies for navigating those challenges as well?
I would love to say it's really easy and it's really swell, but it's always a challenge because it's very it's so many moving parts all over the thing. But I think what's the most important is to have an organization that really embraces this. It's really, I think that I'm very lucky to have the colleagues and the leadership, saying we've got to explore this. We're ready to take, a couple of misfires. Let's see where it goes. It's all really about making your homework really well. It takes a lot of time. And one of the things I would say, what's the biggest challenge? I actually came out of the industry. I was hired as the startup guy. to and one of the curses of the industry, honestly, is over planning. So I just keep fighting that all the time. Yeah, we're not gonna, we can't plan it ready. We just need to get going. Please, let's just start. And this whole concept of learning by doing, people who work with me, they know that I keep saying all this time, let's not overplan, let's do learning by doing, let's break it into small things. And it's really this wisdom that whatever you launch, after a few months, you already need to learn, change it, because it's passionate people. They always want to improve. I mean, if somebody comes to you and say, hey, this is ready and we can let it be there for a quarter century, I don't think that's gonna do the trick.
Absolutely. And I'm going to stick with you, Hannes, for this next question, because I know it's an area that you're passionate about. And I want to dive in and talk a little bit about digital biomarkers. And we know that they hold promise for disease detection and treatment assessments. But I wanted to hear from you about some of the bright spots in this area and the challenges as well.
Yeah, thanks for it. And especially, we like to talk especially about innovation and digital biomarkers in rare disease space. And it's a very special space, I think, first of all, because what the patients go through, because of the misdiagnosis, the lag to get the diagnosis, about 7 years across the board. But especially what's really exciting in this space are the innovators, because it's a very special class of innovators, most because, rare diseases are really rare. People, they are not a good pitch, it's not like a mass market, it's not a good pitch to go to VC. I'm going to go for this, one patient in a million. Let's, invest in this. But the people who innovate, first of all, they are super brilliant, but they usually have a personal connection. They either maybe patients, in often case they're patients themselves, they have somebody in the family or they witnessed that. And that creates a very special working relationship. It's not just like a business as usual. You really have this, need for empathy and understanding. Even if we can't help them, I think we as a company, we try to think, all right, we want to be rare disease leaders, Sanofi, but, and so we need to push for the innovation in this space. We need to, really motivate people to be exciting for that and create conditions for innovate. And that really takes time. And I think that's what I want to say.
Thank you so much. And I see you nodding, Sarah. Is there anything you would like to add to that?
I don't have anything incredibly profound to add, but I agree that the digital biomarker space, the digital endpoints in clinical studies and then applied to real world settings is a real strong opportunity. I was at a conference hosted by Roche earlier this year, and there are some amazing case studies out there. I'll speak to other people's successes, but Novartis was able to use recorded voice analytics for Alzheimer's patients and move from a 45-minute physician-administered battery to a 2-minute assessment of both diagnosis and progression for a patient against their own baseline. And that has severe implications for the patient and then also their caregivers. The audience got really excited and someone raised their hand and said, you can then use that to explain to a caregiver, the vocal analytics looked at memory recall, complexity of words, and filler words like I just used. And they said that the filler words increase, the memory decreases, and the word complexity decreases. And that then actually allows a caregiver to see the difference if a drug's working. It said this drug may delay the loss of memory, the loss of ability to interact with your loved one. So I think that's a high we should be chasing and a standard that is really fantastic. Now the challenge is, how do we make that part of care? How do we make that part of every clinical study? How do we make that part of how HCPs, doctors evaluate their patients? There's a long way to go after that.
And how long is it? How long do we think it will be until that is part of a care setting? I'm just interested to hear your perspectives on that. Yes, Dorothy, they're saying it.
How long, as if I have the crystal ball to these things? I hope it's not as long as I think it's going to be, but things seem to be accelerating. It wasn't biomarkers, but this whole idea of speeding diagnosis or also making diagnosis more efficient. Take a look. I think it was just published over the last couple of days. There was a VA study that used real world evidence within the VA system that actually looked at the speeding of and more efficiently diagnosing people with gastric tumors. And because I guess old practice was looking at people with GERD, et cetera. But look at some of the technology and some of the work that's going on right now. So I do think it will happen faster, but there's no doubt we live in a really, really complex regulatory world where we realize that the biomarkers would have to be approved along with the clinical study, along with the drug, along with the everything else. But hopefully there are passionate people like yourselves who understand that it's a world where you have to test, iterate, and learn quickly. But I don't know the answer, sorry.
I wasn't looking for an exact answer, just some guesses. Hans, did you have something to add?
I maybe add one thing about this. I mean, we're really excited about the digital biomarkers, but then again, I think the fundamental value, what was mentioned in the first panel, is patient safety. And that's actually an area where we see in the digital biomarker space, we need to improve a lot. There's been kind of a really wave of excitement, what we can do. A lot of, every company has done a lot of proof of concepts. And if you go through the literature, I think once, and hopefully in the next few years, we start scaling many of these digital biomarkers. But right now, it's really how do we validate? How do we make sure they work? We don't overdiagnose and then create an overburden on healthcare systems, or we don't miss patients. There's been already some famous cases of really missing classes of patients. So the whole patient safety culture, I'm going to be provocative now. I don't know who was provocative. You were provocative earlier, but this whole patient safety culture really need to be brought into this digital biomarker world, the same level we have it in the life science side. And I think that's one of the areas where we're going to work a lot in the future. And that's going to be the condition for scaling and really having an impact.
And that actually is the opportunity is actually improving equity and access with that, right? Patients who live within 2 miles of Mass General Hospital, like I do, I know I can call the best doctors in the world pretty quickly, but those even just 2 hours away from Massachusetts don't have the same access. So if we can actually leverage the digital solutions, hopefully people can actually be healthier and safer.
And we've had some questions come in from the audience, so I'm going to jump in with some of those now. And the first one is there a need for more robust privacy-preserving federated learning approaches?
This is the same question we had last, and I don't think they got an answer. I don't know if you're much more brainier than the previous panel. I think this whole privacy, of course, data and privacy. I mean, we're all the time getting lectures, from the security people. We're working on it. We want it to be the best possible, for sure. It's a big challenge.
Yeah, I was just going to say, I had the honor of working with some really, really great data scientists over the years in the healthcare space. I mean, there are ways to protect patient privacy and data, again, through kind of pretty sophisticated de-identification models, as well as being able to mash, not technical term, mash large portions of different disparate data to build systems that will still allow complete privacy, but allow a manufacturer or allow a healthcare system or allow an investigator to understand if there are signals coming through, as well as be able to personalize an experience for patients. But it's important.
And we had a question too about on digital biomarkers. So for whoever wants to chime in on this one, can you compare the development of digital biomarkers versus normal biomarkers and how that difference affects the range of biomarkers we can discover or use?
I'm a very specific question. I can start. Whoever asked that question might know their way around the space. I think that there's an absolute overlap in the validation, the scientific integrity and rigor. I think the challenge is that the technology that's used for digital biomarkers, a wearable, a vocal analytics, those technologies are evolving much more quickly. Biomarkers are discovering what in your body is going to tell us what's working or not working. Technology, digital biomarkers, is really how fast can the technology move? How much better can it measure it compared to a biomarker or a physician-administered test? And one of the biggest challenges in the digital biomarker space is that the regulatory authorities are still figuring out, how do you work with AI? How do you work with these model updates? And there's an appropriate slowness there, I think, to make sure we get it right, but it's a totally different regulatory market.
All right, thank you so much. And we have a couple more questions as well. And this person is asking, is there a risk to conflate real world data, so like claims data, with real world patient experiences, such as patient stories and qualitative data? And what do we do?
Sorry, did they say is there a risk?
Is there a risk? So
I think you can add them together to tell a really great story. We've done that. We've done the qualitative research. We've looked at claims. We've looked at encounters, medications. Again, for that anxiety and depression study, we interviewed the patients, but then we looked at do the claims and RX, et cetera, support the story.
Yeah, I would say that it's not one versus the other. It's if you're going to use, qual and quant patient insight data, I think the claims data, medical chart data, other things can validate it perhaps. I'm not sure if there's I guess I would want to do both sides in order to truly understand what one was seeing. Yeah.
I think it's a 1 + 1 = 3 in this world.
And we've had a few more questions, so I'm going to jump in with those two. And so in terms of action plans, how do the pharma companies use real-world data to feedback drug discovery and clinical trial process, and what are the hurdles? Hannes, everyone is looking at you.
Well, yeah, I'm trying to wrap my head around it. So I wouldn't really say that it really supports. I think the whole drug discovery, the early stage, it's a bit of its own world, and has its own dynamics, and especially given now what's happening. I mean, the first panel was all about how AI helped us to find new targets. So I think this revolution is just unfolding right now, and there's a lot to digest, I think, for the drug discovery organizations, every big pharma. I think the real world evidence, how it feeds into the clinical trials, I don't think it really feeds actually that much. I mean, we have, maybe, phase 4 after post-marketization, then that's something where we work on that quite a lot. I would say you always have to look what are the endpoints, what are the primary endpoints of clinical trials, what are the secondary endpoints, and I don't see actually a lot of real-world data being there as a secondary endpoint, but might be I'm wrong on that. I try to read a lot of those protocols when they're available, and they inform you a lot. The same goes kind of for previous discussion about digital biomarkers. I actually don't remember if they, when it comes to molecules, if they've ever been like a primary endpoint. I don't think never. It's a lot of work to get digital biomarkers, even secondary endpoints in a clinical trial. It's just they're not there yet.
And we have, let me see here, one more question, and that is thoughts on scaling post-market RWE collection to develop precision approaches. And they added that the FDA has indicated upcoming guidance for some classes, and are we there yet? Dorothy?
I don't know if we're there yet, but I would say most of the real world evidence applications I've seen have been post-market, like you said, phase 4. In a previous life, we worked really closely, in different company I worked for, we worked really closely with pharmaceutical companies to both kind of use data sets to help create retrospectively what markers we should look at, and then use real world data longitudinally post-market to look at any side effect signals, to look at phase 4 kind of results. And I think it's never at the moment, it doesn't take the place of real life clinical, as real life versus real world, real life clinical studies, but the data is kind of interesting, and it can give one a look at scale as to what's happening post-market.
And that is all the audience questions that we had and all the time that we have for today. But I want to thank our 3 panelists for coming and sharing all of their insights. Thank you so much.